Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for coming. My name is Sinyor. I'm one of the psychiatrists here at Sunnybrook, and I've been asked today to talk to you a little bit about building resilience for mental wellness. So what does that mean? Let me start by asking you what probably is a fairly easy question. Do you have an action plan when you have a cold? And I think the answer is probably yes for everybody. Everybody pretty much knows from when they're small what to do when you have a cold. You rest, you stay in bed, you drink plenty of fluids, you make sure you have Kleenex nearby, you call in sick from school. If things get really bad, if you start to have a really bad fever, you might take a medication. If it gets really bad, you might go see your doctor. And so everyone sort of has a plan. Usually you don't have to go see your doctor, but the key thing is you have your stepwise plan, and if things aren't working, you know how to reach out afterwards. So I want to pose a different question to you, which is, do you have an action plan when you're in distress? And the reason that this is an important question is because everybody is going to be in distress frequently throughout their life. In fact, it's much more common than having a cold. And this is something I know something about. As a psychiatrist, I treat people in my office with anxiety. It's about 30% of the population that has an anxiety disorder at some point. It's about 10 to 20% who have mood disorders, which is the other set of issues that I treat. But the reality is that everybody experiences distress in different ways, whether you have one of those problems or not. And so everybody needs an action plan, just like you have an action plan when you have a cold. So before you implement an action plan, you have to know what causes the issue, or what are you trying to address. Sort of like if you think of it as when you're in school and there's a fire, or hopefully there isn't a fire, but when you do fire drills, you have to understand what are the different signals that tell you to implement a fire drill, right? If you see smoke, if you hear the alarm, and so on. So what can cause distress? Well, it turns out a whole bunch of things can cause distress, all sorts of things that can happen in your family, let's say. I mean, I think everybody out there at some point has had a fight with their parents, probably had multiple fights with their parents. That causes distress. So there's something right off the bat that has probably caused everybody in their whole, in the world some degree of distress. For some people, if there's a separation or a divorce in the family, a death of somebody or a pet in the family, for some people, social problems are very distressing. Again, just about everybody, I think, no matter how kind of easygoing you are, probably everybody at some point has had a fight with their friends, maybe has had a relationship breakup. Hopefully people aren't bullied, but maybe some people certainly will experience bullying, unfortunately, in their lives, or will feel somehow isolated. Those things can cause distress. And then all sorts of school and work problems can cause distress. So if you get a bad mark, if you're fighting with your teacher, after school, if you get a job and you lose a job, or you're having financial difficulties, all of these sorts of things can cause distress. And it's important to note that different people experience things in different ways. So for some people, fighting with their parents is very stressful. For other people, it doesn't bother them if they fight with their parents. Maybe that happens a lot, but getting a bad mark is very difficult for them. So everybody needs to know what for you is the thing that tends to cause distress, or set of things, because lots of different things cause people distress. So once you know what the things are that cause distress, the next thing that you have to ask is, what are signs of distress? Because it's good to understand what it is that may be going on in your body or your daily rhythms that might be telling you, actually, something's not right here, I have to do something. And we can divide that into different categories. So one option is physiology, like what's actually happening in the moment in your body. So those could be things like a fast heart rate, your heart is going faster than usual, or you feel sweaty, or you're short of breath, or you're dizzy, or you get a headache, or you get an upset stomach, or you feel nauseous. Actually, pretty much any negative, unpleasant bodily sensation could be a sign of distress. And if you're getting a lot of them all the time and you don't have some other reason for having that, then that may be a likely cause. So not just sort of physiology from moment to moment, but also daily rhythms can change. So people who are under stress may eat less or eat more, or sleep less or sleep more. So that can also be a signal. We often think in psychiatry about people's thoughts. We spend tons of time in my field thinking about people's thoughts, and sometimes when they're not quite right or they don't match perfectly to the situation. So when people are in distress, they can have a lot of really negative or pessimistic thoughts. I'll never get along with my friends. My parents hate me. I'm never going to get into the right school. My marks are no good. I can't take this anymore. I've had it, and so on. People can have all kinds of very distressing thoughts that occur when they're distressed. It doesn't necessarily mean that those things are true. Often, actually, they're not true. And when you're not in distress, you can think about it rationally. But people can have all sorts of difficult thoughts when they're in distress. And then the last group of sort of things to look at are behaviors. So for some people, they might keep to themselves, stay in their room more. They may sort of not engage, might not go out with friends, not go to parties and things like that if they're in distress. So a change in behavior can often signal that there's something that's wrong and that needs to be addressed in some way. Okay, so this is the key point, the key part of what I'm going to tell you about, which is that everybody needs an action plan about how to manage their distress. And the first thing that you need to know, as I mentioned earlier, about your action plan is what are the triggers? So for you, is it a bad mark? Is it a fight with your parents, fight with your friends, et cetera, et cetera? So what's your trigger that tells you you need to implement your action plan? And again, what are the signs? Is it when you start to feel more tearful or start to feel more worried or have another emotional response that might suggest that something is wrong? So the first thing that we actually suggest, this may sound surprising to people, is distraction. And the reason that distraction is very effective is that human beings and our brains are really designed to experience short bursts of distress. Although people can be distressed for many hours, often it's much, much shorter, a few minutes or half an hour. And so a distraction technique can often be very, very effective at just allowing things to pass. And that could be anything, right? It could be, playing a quick game on your phone, or sleeping it off, or going for a walk, or going for a run, or taking a shower, or streaming an episode of TV, listening to music, any kind of thing that might be able to distract you from what's going on. If the distraction steps don't work, the next strategy that can be effective is an emotional regulation strategy. So emotional regulation strategies are things like breathing exercises. So when you're stressed out, often your heart rate and your blood pressure increase substantially. That's sort of the physiology of stress, because our bodies are designed when we feel stressed to be ready to run away from a predator, like in the jungle. Problem is, in the 21st century, usually there's no one running after you, so this increase in heart rate and blood pressure doesn't really help that much. So what often helps is to tell your body, don't worry, I don't need to run away, I have lots of oxygen. And so your heart rate and blood pressure can drop. And the way to do that is to take slow, deep breaths. So you can, I don't know if you can see this, but you put your hand over your belly and you take a big, slow breath and hold that. Let all the oxygen flow into your body. Breathe out. Hold that for a couple of seconds. Repeat. Breathe in, and so on. And what you do is you oxygenate your body, you pull in all that oxygen, and your body realizes, okay, we have lots of this oxygen, we don't have to pump so hard to run away, and actually your heart rate and blood pressure will go down and you'll feel better. That doesn't always work. For some people, meditation strategies, often you can go to your favorite social media, look up meditation, look up relaxation videos, or something like, let's say, for example, progressive muscle relaxation. You can Google that and see that. That's often very effective. Sometimes when people are very, very stressed out, you need something more visceral. So temperatures can help. We sometimes have people squeeze ice cubes. Squeezing ice cubes gives some people something else to focus on. If that doesn't work, we all have a physiological response called the dive reflex, which can be very effective. So when you plunge a mammal into ice cold water, heart rate and blood pressure drop and people feel more relaxed. So you don't have to plunge, thankfully, you don't have to plunge yourself in ice cold water. The reflex is on the face. So what you do is you run a face cloth under ice cold water, and you go like this. And what will happen is you will suddenly feel shivery and your heart rate and blood pressure will involuntarily drop. And that can be very, very effective at managing distress. So often distraction or regulation strategies, which you use on your own, can be very effective. But that doesn't always work. If it doesn't work, the next step is to use distraction with people. So you call up a friend or you text a friend, say, I'm not doing, well, actually, sorry, in this case, you just say, hey, I'd like to be distracted. Can we, or you may not say that, but you think it. You ask, can we go to the mall, or can we go for a walk, or just chat with somebody, do something, use someone else for distraction. People will do that all the time. You don't have to tell them that you're using them for distraction. The next step, if that doesn't work, is actually confiding in someone that you're in distress. So this is a trusted person, your best friend, a sibling, your parents, whoever it might be, saying, I'm not doing well right now, I'm feeling really upset. Can we just talk about it? And that person can support you. If that doesn't work, the next step is to tell someone that you aren't feeling good, a professional in your life. That could be a doctor, a social worker, a psychologist, someone at your school, school counselor, and so on. Someone with professional expertise. And if it turns out that none of that works or nothing is available, I suggest calling a crisis line or actually going to the emergency department. And just like when you have a cold, you can go and reach out for help. But you only use that if all of the other strategies don't work. The other thing, of course, is to avoid anything that might make the situation worse. So in other words, for example, if you're not looking after yourself, you're not sleeping, or you're not eating, make sure that you get good nutrition, make sure that you sleep a decent amount. And again, if you're not doing that, reach out. I've put up on the slides this thing called the coping card, which is essentially the technique which I've just walked you through, that you can just Google. If you Google Sunnybrook coping card, you can fill out your own and you can work on your own distress management plan. So in summary, my hope is that after this short session, you understand that 100% of people will be in distress repeatedly in life. So everyone needs an action plan. Most of the time, something on that list that I described to you will work. If for some reason it doesn't, reach out. People are here to help. And so good luck, and wishing everyone all the best.